Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady, back today talking about onboarding and orientation with our special guest, Barry Ackerman. Thanks for coming back, Barry.
Thanks so much, Wendy, for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, what are the worst things that ever happened? No names, please. No company names, no human names. But in general, what's the worst thing that can happen with a poor onboarding experience?
Well, I'll tell you something that is a real life story, did not happen to me. I won't give any identifying information, but there was an employee that was hired by a smaller company, and it was a new position for the company. They weren't replacing someone. It was a new position. They were trying to get into trying to fill a new focus, and they hired this person. And I actually joined the company a couple of months after that person did. And I went to, he was sitting in the conference room, this person. And I went in and just started talking to him. He didn't have an office because they didn't have an office room. He was in the conference room. That was his base. But that was the least of the issues. He had nothing to do. They basically told him, go sit in there and figure it out. Figure what out? I don't know. You're supposed to figure it out. The guy sat there. I mean, the company paid, I don't know how much salary they paid to this guy to do nothing until they got their act together. And he felt like an idiot. Like, I'm here, they're paying me to be here. They have no idea what they want me to do. There's only so much, yes, I'm a smart person and I can figure certain things out, but without any direction at all, what do you want from me? Right. So that was just, I mean, it was painful to watch from a lot of different, from a lot of different perspectives. Feel bad for the employee, feel bad for the company because they kind of, they hired him for a reason. They wanted to go into a certain area, but they had no idea how to do it. And couldn't even communicate like what his, where he should go, any kind of focus, any kind of goals. It was just painful.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've seen this happen many times too. Employers get excited or desperate and they say, we want to get this person in right now before they go work for somebody else, or we want to get them in. Let's just start them. It's like, hey, calm down, everybody. You can give them an offer and say, but we can't have you start for a month. So don't resign from your other job yet. It's right. Called communication, folks. And then a lot of times you'll get an owner or whoever say, just hire them and let's get started. And then the owner forgets to tell people that they even hired them and somebody shows up. I have that happen to clients when they're beginning to be my clients, not when they're ending to be my clients too. Like, oh yeah, we just have new hires show up and there's been no communication whatsoever from one department to another. I know a lot of HR people, usually when I just start doing audits and working with companies out there, be like, yeah, we just have new hires show up and no one even told us. So HR is the one that gets the slack because the new hire thinks it's the HR person's fault that they're not ready for the orientation and onboarding, which is really just paperwork at that point in time. And so folks, please don't embarrass your organization. When we have this thing called social media, anybody can post anything on social media, whether it's true or not. And usually, all those reviews, like the Indeed reviews, there's so many platforms that you can do company reviews on. People usually don't go to them because things are going well.
No, they don't usually.
They usually go, you know what, I got something to say. And then they see all these other negative things on there and then they explode. Side note here as well, I would say, be careful how you're addressing them. If you find out that if it's a current employee who is doing negative feedback and negative reviews on your company, whether it's regarding onboarding or something else, because the fact that they're taking the time to write that, actually does mean they care. It just means they're also so upset enough about it that they're over it, but they're still taking your paycheck. So, right. If I was your HR consultant or Barry, we'd be like, hold on here, time out. Let's not penalize the employee for speaking up. Let's penalize the entire management team for not being the management team that these employees feel they can go to safely and say, hey, we got issues here. And
right.
again,
you're going to go after the symptom or you're going to go after the source.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. You're going to go after the symptom or the source and the result. No, talking about the source of the result still doesn't fix the symptom. And so again, what I would really, really, advise is just, get out a spreadsheet. I don't care if it's a piece of paper or chalk and a board, just take a picture of it later. Just say, here are all the things that are necessarily to work in our company. It's usually all these forms, background checks, all that stuff. And then here's the gazillion things they need to be trained on to be, super successful. I wanted to read real quick a quote from Gallup, and it talks about training employees. I don't care if you have 20, 30 years experience, every employee still needs to be trained. Taking the time to train new employees and make them feel at home makes them feel more committed, and it increases their chances of staying with the company longer. According to Gallup, there's a correlation between the number of engaged employees and a variety of outcomes, including people staying, people being absent less days, better customer reviews and customer evaluations, better safety records, which is super, super important and expensive, because if you have horrible safety records, your workers' comp is probably going to drop you. And then in most states, it stays, that increased cost in workers' comp stays for a couple years. Gallup also correlates higher engaged employees, which means training, which means proper orientation and onboarding for new hires, to higher profit rates as well. If you are sitting here today listening going, how am I going to convince my company of this? That's what you need to talk about. Because if your CEOs, your CFOs, your C-suite doesn't seem to care, and I'm not saying they don't, it's just that they have other things going on. But if they don't seem to care about people's feelings, I can assure you they care about profit and revenue.
Yes, they do.
And that's why I love going to, Gallup and other, really big resources that they've already done the research. Just be careful, folks, when you are comparing, like, say, for example, a Gallup survey to your organization. Make sure it's appropriate for your industry. And if it's not, then go and find a survey that is done maybe in your state and or your industry or both, so that your executives will actually listen to you. What about lawsuits if orientation goes wrong?
It's like we've talked about, someone could say something wrong without meaning to, maybe. And that can be a lawsuit, like we said, whether it's a sensitivity or just someone thought they were, being welcoming to the new person, and all of a sudden you got yourself a big mess.
Right. Or another thing could be, since we have so much, racial discrimination and even sexual harassment and gender identity discrimination going on, it may not at all have been the intent, but that your manager said, I properly onboarded and trained these 3 people over here who happen to be white males. Not to pick on white males, sorry, Barry, but and then, basically then they got busy and they say, oh, well, this guy that's coming in, now he's got experience somewhere else, so that his training is not necessary. Just throw him in, and he fails, and he happens to be not a white male, maybe not a straight white male. Right there is grounds for a lawsuit, not only from, the employee, but from the EEOC too. And so I have helped a few employers who, when they were about to do layoffs, which is the opposite of what we're talking about, I go, give me all your stats first. And they unintentionally were laying off people that were of protected classes, but that was not the reason they were doing it. So folks, it's not always intentional. A lot of times discrimination is unintentional. And that's where somewhere like Barry could come in to help you.
That is so true. That is so true. Like you said, with no intent at all. Again, people are overwhelmed, people are busy, but these things do happen.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it's unfortunate. And now that we are, in this virtual and remote world, which we're going to talk about in our last session here quickly, but now that we're in this remote and virtual world, we HR, business owners, managers, leaders, any kind of team supervisor, if you're supervising somebody in a different state Now you suddenly have to know all the laws of that state too. So we're going to talk about that in a minute when we come right back.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.